Welcome back to my card review. This is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, then, well, go and watch it, basically. Before we get started, I'd just like to review one of the current cards in-game at the moment, Big Game Hunter. Okay, so we all know what this does, we all know how good it is, we all know everyone runs it. Basically, everyone has been saying that you won't run this card because it gets BGH'd, whatever. But with all these big late game dragons coming into play and some of the old ones going to come back, I don't think this card is going to be quite as good anymore, just because there's so many targets that you're going to be BGHing that you might just run out of BGHs, and by the time you get to the late game you'll have nothing to BGH. Now this is just my interpretation. I'll give an example. Let's go with Shaman. Although I'm probably not going to be running this myself, this is just an example. You play an Earth Elemental, it gets BGH'd. You play, I don't know, Ren Blackhand, it gets BGH'd. Then you play Nefarian, it doesn't get BGH'd because you're out of BGHs. You then play Ragnaros, it doesn't get BGH'd. You play Major Domo Executus, it doesn't get BGH'd. I mean, it's all going to be dependent on what the meta is. Like, if you're playing Handlock, you can only BGH a certain amount of targets. So, that said, I still think this card is going to be very good. I think you're going to be running 2 copies of it in every single deck. But yeah, I just think that if you're saying that all these cards are going to avoid being BGH, then depending on what the meta is at the time, then obviously if we're in a very slow controlling meta, then I think you can afford to run quite a few cards that are over 7 attack, just purely based on the synergy that you'll get with some of the dragon cards being able to remove that BGH quickly, because oftentimes when BGH is so good is that it trades at least 2 for 1. So now if you're playing a 7 attack rather minion, and then it gets, I can't remember the name of it now, but the guy who's like Fire Elemental, Blackrock Corruptor I think it is, then you're going to be sitting quite pretty in the late game. But anyways, let's move on to the card review. So, moving on to Rogue, the first card I'm going to be reviewing is the Dark Iron Skulker. The 5 cost for 4/3 Battlecry, deal 2 damage to all undamaged minions. At the moment in Constructed, Rogue only really has one orientation, and that is the Oil Rogue that we all hate playing against so much. Does this card fit into the Oil Rogue? No, it doesn't. Will it bring up a new kind of Rogue? I don't think so. The only real deck this would fit in is like a Tempo Rogue, and that's been done before, where it just doesn't really have a win condition. There's a lot of value, but you run out of steam very, very quickly. In Arena, on the other hand, this card is going to be fantastic. It is essentially a Consecration and gain a 4/3 for 1 cost. So yes, I think this is going to be very good in Arena. Probably rate it very good. Now we move on to the Gang Up. 2 cost, choose a minion, shuffle 3 copies of it into your deck. My interpretation of this card is that you can use any minion, so obviously it's going to be a minion on the field. So you do this against your opponent's Sylvanas, then you get 3 Sylvanuses running through your deck. Does it fit into the current Rogue? Well, not really, I don't think. I don't think this fits into the current Rogue, but it may promote a new Rogue that runs out of steam a little bit, but it doesn't actually draw you the cards. So we'll have to see about that one. In Arena, this card is pretty bad because it's not actually drawing any cards, it's just putting them into your deck, and by the time you get to draw those cards, you may already be dead. There's just nothing to it in Arena, and I think it's going to be absolutely terrible. Moving on to Shaman then. Lava Shock. 2 cost, deal 2 damage, unlock your overloaded mana crystals. Now there are a lot of ideas going around about this card. You play Earth Elemental, then next turn you deal your 2 damage, but 2 mana, 2 damage, like what are you going to be damaging? Are you going to be damaging to kill it? Are you just going to be doing it to unlock your mana crystals? I don't know. I mean, we already had Lightning Bolt go out, and Crackle is so efficient that I don't really see this card being played unless we're actually talking a proper overloady deck here with the Unbound Elemental, Earth Elementals, your Lightning Storm, your Lightning Bolts, all that kind of stuff. I don't really see where this card is going to be fitting in, especially with the next card that I'm going to be reviewing coming into play. I don't play an awful lot of Shaman, so this card may work somewhere, but it's just when you look at the 2 damage, I mean, Shaman is all about being able to play those super good budgeted minions for their cost, and then having the cards in hand to deal with the whole overloaded mechanic. That I just don't see it with this card. I mean, those sorts of combos that people talk about, I mean, what are you going to be dealing 2 damage to kill it? I mean, it's just not efficient. I mean, 2 mana deal 3 damage is good, but 2 mana deal 2 damage, I mean, you're not going to be killing anything with that. In Arena, this card is bad because you can't guarantee that you're going to be getting the overloads, and 2 mana for 2 damage, as I said, is bad. Moving on to the next card, Fireguard Destroyer. 4 costs for 3/6 Battlecry, gain 1 to 4 attack, overload 1. This card is very, very strong. On average, you'll be getting a 4 mana 5/6 with 1 overload drawback. I mean, this card is brilliant. It's just great. I think it's going to be run in all Shaman decks, and I think it may be the card that Shaman has been missing from being that super strong meta deck that has been lacking recently, because since the release of GBG, I mean, Mech Shaman crept onto the scene a couple of times, but it hasn't really stuck. But I do think with the addition of this card that Shaman will be back. In Arena, this card is going to be absolute top of the tier. You get this and it's lined up against Yeti, you pick this. It's really one of those cards where I don't see what you'd pick over it unless you're needing 2 jobs, unless you're needing serious late game. You always pick this card. It is phenomenal. Moving along to the Warlock then, we're going to go with Imp Gang Boss. 3 mana for a 2/4. Whenever this minion takes damage, summon a 1/1 Imp. So this is kind of like Imp Master, except Imp Master is 1/5, and then at the end of your turn you summon an Imp. Well, the Demon Lock is something that people are trying to make work, including myself, but I just don't find it consistent enough. Is this the card that's going to make it consistent enough? I don't think so. It dies to a lot of stuff. I mean, for example, you play this, you're against the Paladin, he True Silver Champions it down, and you're left with a 1/1 Imp. That's not really that good. If you compare it to something like Piloted Shredder, although it is 1 mana more, you're getting, well, better stats, and the minion is going to be of a much better quality. In Arena, this card is going to be good, but not much better than that. Okay, so now we have the Demon Wrath. 3 cost, deal 2 damage to all non-demon minions. We've just spoken about that Demon Lock deck. I do think that Shadow Flame is better than this card. It's a little bit more efficient, I think, because in the Demon Lock you're going to be running cards which are not demons, so it's going to be dealing damage to your own stuff. That said, I think this is going to get a spot in a new deck which I'm going to be trying out straight away that I've had an idea. It's going to be sort of half zoo, half dragons. So you're going to have that Fire Element, Flame Imp, Argus, and whatnot. But at the same time, you're going to be having the Blackwing Corruptor, the Technician. I think this card is going to do pretty well. In Arena, this card is bad because you're going to be playing a lot of non-demon minions. You're going to be killing your own stuff. For 3 mana, deal 2 damage to the non-demon minions. It's just not very good. This card is a very tricky card to evaluate, though. I'm going to remain skeptical and just try it out myself. And last up, we have the Axe Flinger. 4 cost, 2/5. Whenever this minion takes damage, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. I'm going to go out and say this, that in the aggro warrior deck, this card is too slow. Now, you might be thinking, what? Too slow? It deals 2 damage to the enemy hero when it is damaged. Yes, it does, but at 4 cost in that sort of deck, you've got Death's Bite, you've got Mortal Strike. I mean, it doesn't do damage when it's being played. It's Silence Bait. It's going to be quite easy to remove, I think. In Arena, this card is absolutely terrible. The stats are bad. The effect is bad. It's just bad. And for the last class card review, we have Revenge, which is a 2-cost spell that deals 1 damage to all minions. If you have 12 or health less, deal 3 damage instead. They seem to be going with a theme of enraged decks for warriors, and I don't really see where this fits in. If you have 12 or less health and you're playing an aggro deck, then you're probably going to lose because it looks like you've been behind for a while, and the 2 mana deal 1 damage to all minions is quite bad. So I don't think this card is going to be used at all. In Arena, this card is pretty mediocre because you're not going to be at 12 or less health when you want to use this, and well, it's a good way to come back from behind. However, that's not always going to happen, so I'll say this card's average. And with that, that wraps up part 2. All the class cards are done. So tune in for part 3, where it's going to be the last part, and I'm going to be talking about all the neutral cards. Remember, if you liked my video or found it in any way useful, please thumbs up, subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much.
Blackrock Mountain, a Hearthstone adventure!